Nee, op zich niet.
Oh,
Streaming. In theorie zou nu nu met enkele seconden zeg maar het event logo. Goedenavond allen en welkom bij de OWASP Nederland Chapter Meeting van oktober 2021. Deze editie is online zoals de voorgaande ook waren. Ik denk dat ik de reden niet eens meer hoef uit te leggen. En over ongeveer 5 minuten begint onze eerste presentator, namelijk Jeroen Willemsen. Blijf dan alsjeblieft in de lijn en geniet van de wachtmuziek, die je trouwens wel zelf moet opzetten.
Let's go. Break a leg.
Goedenavond, good evening everyone, and welcome to the OWASP Netherlands Chapter Meeting, October 2021. Our first presenter is Jeroen Willemsen. He is talking about the secrets management journey from code to vault. Jeroen Willemsen, welcome and thank you for presenting. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Good to be here again virtually. Well, it's in my attic while being there virtually, but still love it. I understood that there's also live chat at YouTube. Feel free to ask any questions, but it can be redirected during the talk. And I would say, let's go. Today I want to talk a little bit about secret management and about a journey that we had with, various customers over time while trying to help them to secure stuff a little bit. About me, I'm Jeroen Willemsen. I'm a security consultant nowadays again, a DevOps consultant again at Xebia. This talk is basically based on all the stuff that we found at various customers while trying to help them to create a better SDLC or trying to secure stuff or doing pen tests. If you want to know more about me, just follow the link and you'll see tons of things like blogs or GitHub profile. You can also give me feedback, and I would love you to do so, to give some feedback about the presentation, because I love to learn from everybody around me. All right, so major question, can you keep a secret? That seems to be naturally hard for lots of people, whether it's the secrets that they're supposed to hold or secrets at work. And it seems to be even harder when working with a computer. And of course, you can ask yourself, what type of secrets are we talking about? So there's, of course, tons of examples of secrets, of things that eventually need to be secret. Stuff like credentials or your private GPG key or your sign-in key or your password or a certain API key is pretty clear that that's supposed to be kept secret. But tokens and URLs, certain HMAC keys, certain QR codes that's only meant for you to do certain authorization actions are also just meant for you or meant for a certain system and shouldn't be shared as well. That can become a little bit hard from time to time. So the question, of course, that's pretty central is how do we manage all of these? How do we work with these? The way I want to go about that is by going over the little journey with you all. Where we want to start, where we found the secrets first, what that means if you find a secret at that level, and how to fix possible issues with that or detect whether the secret is there. We start with our secrets directly in application code or configuration code. Then we'll talk a little bit about secrets in containers. And then when you're running Kubernetes, for instance, secrets within pods. And then how to have those secrets in Vault. And after that, it's actually up to you as attendees to decide together what we're going to do next, whether we're going to zoom into some stuff like a secrets pipeline or whether we're going to zoom into, for instance, AWS-based secrets management and the mistakes you can make over there. So while we're going through the first part, think about that, think about what you would like to see, and we can make this a little bit more interactive. So basically, you choose part of the content as being a live viewer. Let's start with secrets in code. Most of the code is in Java, by the way, that we will be presenting. So over here, you see a public class called constants, and we have a password, default password, do not change. Now you might ask yourself, who is ever doing that? And you'll hear a lot of reasoning about developers saying, oh, this is just there as a stopgap for testing or whatever. We'll remove it later. And then as it turns out, that is not really removed. And then we even see people reasoning sometimes, yeah, but it's at the backend service. Nobody can see this because it's running somewhere in the cloud and nobody can just access that. But don't forget that this is right now also in Git. So what people then thought of is, okay, let's make this a little bit more dynamic. So here you see a Spring Boot implementation or part of that basically. And what you see over here is a value of the special field, which will later on, which is configured in the application properties of a Spring Boot application, where then the actual value is set up. And then now that variable special field after initialization of the application will contain the value that's in the application or properties. And we actually, we tried to make a bit of fun of it as in, hey, it's application properties. That's not the same as hard coding. But yeah, people actually reason that way. And obviously, those who do Java development will know, well, it's still then pretty hard in the code right now because the application properties is also committed to Git. So these might not be good ideas because anybody who watches Git can have a look at this. So I legitimately got the question, is it then a better idea to put it into a container? Well, let's dive into that and see what that actually means if you try to do so. If you put stuff into a container, you basically, for instance, have your Docker file. Like, for instance, we open the JDK because, we were running Java in there. And then we have certain end variable set where we put secrets in. One of them is, for instance, the arg-based password, which is coming from an actual argument and then it's loaded as an environment variable. And the other is a directly set environment variable in the side of the Docker container, which basically means if you run the container, then these two environment variables will be visible, where arg-based password needs to be set as a command argument, and then this is on my command line will be basically the value of the arg-based password. Now again, you can consume this in Java by using the similar overloading mechanism as we saw on the previous slide. This might sound like a good idea, but this also means that it's now persisted inside the Docker container. So anybody with access to the Docker container can basically see that. And in order to basically make that visible, we created a little project called Wrong Secrets. And by means of we is Ben Daan and Anne Baars both helped me to set this up. So together we create a little project called Wrong Secrets. What it basically is a Java Spring Boot application that runs in a container that can be scheduled on Minikube or a Kubernetes cluster and can also run in AWS. And within that, you'll see various of the concepts that I explain right now being shown. And as a punnable app, you can then try to find the secrets. So as I just said, okay, it sounds a bit dumb to actually put that secrets in. Let's see how this actually looks. So for instance, if I, this first demo will be by means of video. If I start up the application in the Addo example container, because we first prepared this for the all-day DevOps presentation. Then after it's started up and I open my my challenges, then the first challenge is basically you need to find the hard-coded secret. Remember this default login password that we just talked about? So if I just copy that and put it in over here, because it's the hard-coded password, then basically it says your answer is correct, meaning yes, you basically found the password we were looking for. And then of course, does it always says correct? No, if you now press submit, it says it's incorrect. So up to challenge 2 now for a Docker container. So remember, we put that stuff in the container. For instance, this is my command line password. If we now copy in that again into our running application and we submit that, then basically we find the answer is correct. Now, of course, you might ask yourself, okay, what's the value of that? Now I just learned how to not to use that. Let's first zoom a little bit into the problems that we actually arise. So if you hard code your secrets like that, there's a few problems that we basically run into. The first one is, of course, visibility. That goes actually 2 ways. The first way is that the visibility of the secret is much larger because anybody with access to the container in the container stage or to the code inside the container by decompilation, by the way, can just right now see the secrets, whether it's the Java secret or the Docker container secret. Rotating the secret will also be hard because how do you make sure that if somebody starts rotating the secret by means of updating the code, that the receiving end is also updated? And how do we then ensure that the older version of the secret is no longer used to not cause any more troubles? Of course, the secret is much more reachable by everybody. And at the same time, it's also getting less visible who is actually reaching it at this point in time. And then, of course, we in code gladly capture the history of the secret. And if somebody is still using incrementing values of a secret, then everybody understands that having the history captured is not a very good idea. An incrementing secret can also be like an incrementing root with some sort of hash function on top of it to provide some random output, but then still becomes predictable and see what happens. The next problem is, of course, auditability. There's no way that we can find out where the secret is used, how it's used, and by whom else it's been used then other than the application where the secret was hard-coded for. And there's also no way to actually couple the secret to the actual authorization of the actions that can be done with the secret. And these are, of course, just a few of the problems that arise with these. If you look at different websites of secret management solutions, they'll explain tons more of problems that might arise there. So the major question, of course, is how can you detect this without having to pay a lot of bucks to get anything done? There is a bunch of tools out there that can already help you. For instance, Trufflehawk and K8s Secret can help you to detect secrets in your current code base. That is actually quite helpful and should be really used in that sense. Another tool, which is called Docker, can help you to identify environment variables within your Docker container that are actually suspicious or troublesome. So let's have a look at that, for instance. So here you see me running Trufflehawk. And with a bunch of command arguments to make sure that regex are enabled and entropy to look for strings with high entropy. And I just go through the full wrong secrets GitHub repository. And one of the things you see there, for instance, is public static string password, default login password not changed, which is actually one of the values we were looking for. So this is actually something you can easily use yourself. Go over to your code base, start applying Trufflehawk to it, go over the full Git history and see if you can find actually hard-coded secrets. Whether those secrets are in use or not actually is less important because it always gives more contextual information to anybody else who gets access to the code without actually being allowed to do so. And of course, you see a few other things like the string new key and a few other things that happened, and those might help you later on if you want to try the wrong secret application yourself. Trufflehawk can be downloaded from this repository, and there's also installation instructions over there on how to use it. If it comes to the Docker container, you could have used Docker. So for instance, if you use Docker on this container and the other released containers, you'll see a few alerts popping up, such as the fatal alert sysdi0010. Like I told earlier, says suspicious env key found. And if you then inspect those env keys, you'll possibly see what the problem is over there. Now, of course, these steps did not detect everything. And what I would like to invite you to is go to the wrong secret repository, download it or clone it and try the applications yourself and see if you can find the other secrets that are not detectable that easy. And then, of course, what you often see is that people try to obfuscate the secrets in a certain way by moving it to caps, by concatenating different secrets, hoping that you can't see the actual secret in there, by encoding them. One of the favorite statements you'll see every year in InfoSec Twitter is base64 encoding is not encryption. I'm pretty sure we keep on shouting that as info security specialists. Doesn't mean that everybody listens to that. Or we enrich the secret by putting stuff extra in without and then filtering it out once we move ahead. And sometimes we actually see secrets being encrypted. That's actually something we tend to see a lot more often, which is great, which makes it also harder to unveil the secret. But often we then find that same key very near to where we found the original secret, which puts us back into trouble again. For all of these different things, you can use additional rules in tools like CodeKL, Trufflehawk, and lots of other tools available nowadays. Also easily integratable in Jenkins or in GitLab or GitHub Actions in order to scan your code base, in order to scan for secrets and possibly derivations of that. So by now, I think we all realize that putting the stuff in Docker is not a good idea. Putting the stuff in code is not a good idea either. So what about Kubernetes configmaps? So at the right-hand side, you see a config map defined. And the secret is the funny.entry. This is K8s config map. There's a bunch of metadata in there. And what it will basically do for the default namespace, it has a secrets file, which will have basically the data entry inside. So far, so good. So yeah, the problem now, of course, is although this code is no longer in the app, because basically what you can do is then take this config map and take the value and make sure it's accessible for a pod where the Docker container runs off the wrong secrets applications, for instance, which is what you're going to do with the wrong secrets app in the first place. And now, of course, it's not directly hard-coded inside the application code, but now we hard-coded it somewhere else as being a config map, because every time you want to kill off your cluster and start rebuilding it again, if you want to make sure you don't need to keep state elsewhere, you'll have to hard-code your config map somewhere. By default, this is easily accessible unless you start doing additional ABAC or airbag work, which allows you to make sure that nobody can just easily with kubectl, for instance, access the config map. But it's very easy to make mistakes in this area. And we often see people enabling airbag or ABAC and configuring it half the way, which still allows it to be too open so people can still access the config map. And this is not encrypted at your default storage without additional work. So basically, this is still open and people can still access it. So config maps by themselves are not really a good idea. That's also why in Kubernetes land, they have something called a Kubernetes secret. At your right-hand side, you see a Kubernetes secret, which actually always has its data base 64 encoded, because it could also have binary data inside, and it's a kind of secret. And again, we have a few additional data things inside of the secret that allows you to, again, make sure you could expose it to a running pod, and then basically let that pod consume the secret. And isolating secrets makes sense in terms of files, and there you can apply, again, your ABAC or your ABAC to make sure that it's harder to access it by any person by hand. And it still requires quite some effort. And the problem with that is that any control you put inside to make sure nobody else can mount in that secret. So for instance, make sure that you have ABAC and RBAC in place. ABAC or airbag in place, that you did make sure that the secret is not easily accessible, but only for the pods where it's part of the deployment. And still, if, for instance, you're able to attack the cluster, you get into trouble. But a little bit more about that later. Secrets can also be encrypted, for instance, with the encrypt data, and this can still be challenging. And like I mentioned earlier, when a cluster is hacked, so basically when, for instance, a pod is compromised, you can mount in the worker node, it becomes relatively easy to get the secrets. Similarly, if you didn't do namespace isolation and network isolation correctly, it becomes easier to bypass certain restrictions to, again, consume secrets that should not even be exposed in a namespace where your pod is active, for instance. Madhu Kula made something beautiful to show this, which is called, I forgot the name, I'll mention it later. It's basically a pawnable Kubernetes cluster with lots of exercises, which can help you a lot to realize what type of security you have to enable to make sure that your cluster gets hardened. And luckily, there's also the sys benchmarks that will tell you what to enable and what to configure correctly to make sure that it's harder to bypass these type of things. Still, we often see during pen tests that lateral movement is still easily possible. So apparently, using a Kubernetes secret can still be problematic. And then, of course, we also have rotation expiry challenges, because the moment we basically put this Kubernetes secret in, how do you then make sure that you rotate this timely? Because the consumer of the secret, as well as the target where the secret is used for by the consumer, will have to be in sync, for instance. So how do you make sure that these type of things go correctly? This can still be pretty troublesome. So if you want to get rid of that trouble, and if you want to get rid of the trouble of moving it around, you could, for instance, move to HashiCorp Vault or any other similar solution. So Isogroup Vault is basically a secret management solution that allows you to host static secrets, dynamic secrets, provide credentials as a service. It has its PKI provider, so you can work with your own certificate change, for instance. It has encryption as a service with advanced secrets. So basically, it can encrypt something for you and then give that back to you and also decrypt it. All of the secrets are versioned. There's a lot of auditing in there. And the nice thing is you can seal the vault. So when you in absolutely big trouble and you feel like, okay, we have to now make sure that nobody touches the secret because it might get compromised, then you can basically seal it. The way vault use works is too lengthy to discuss it completely in this presentation, but let's just go over a few things so you get at least a bit of a feeling for the complexity of it. So, for instance, you can authenticate users. One is, for instance, by allowing a user to authenticate with LDAP credentials, if that's configured correctly at the Vault as an out method. Then Vault will take that towards the identity provider and check if you are you, if that's all okay. And if all is okay, then it basically generates a token. And attaches policies to the token given your role or you as a user, what you're allowed to do. And then you get the token. And from there onwards, you can work with the token. It can also authenticate applications. For instance, whenever we deploy a pod to Kubernetes, then if we use a service account token to make sure it can authenticate. Then that application uses that service account token to authenticate against Vault. The Vault can then validate at the Kubernetes API whether the token is correct, and if so, then Vault can return a token towards the application, which can then be used for secrets, for instance. This all sounds great, but it's easier to see that in action. By the way, we have both as part of the wrong secrets, and you'll see a few problems when you interact with that and why that is a problem. So let's have a for sure demo. What we basically will be using is a lot of auto wiring from Spring Boot. That's the nice thing about Vault, how it's currently interacting with the Java world through Spring Cloud Vault integration. And what you can basically say is, okay, I have a configuration property called Vault password. And there I have a certain value inside the password, and I have a getter for that. And lots of things go auto-wired and automatically configured through the application of properties. And then you can basically get that secret from Vault after the authentication is done automatically as well. And that's easier shown as a short demo. So here we have a short setup. This is, by the way, a script that's also part of the wrong secrets application. If you just run K8s Vault minikube start while having the right things installed, please check the README for that, and you can easily check that out. So it basically deploys console Vault, and then then you can also access Vault directly at localhost 820.100. There you see that we have created a out method for Kubernetes. So pods can indeed authenticate in a way that we just described. And well, this is some default service token type configuration setup. And of course, there's stuff like TTL, but we'll skip that for now. Then there's a set of policies. For instance, for the secret challenge, all it can do, it can go to secret data application and secret data secret challenge and read the secrets there. So the application can't update it. It can only read the secret that we put in there. And then we have the secret challenge, which has the full password or password value, which, well, as you saw earlier in code, quite mixes to that. And that's the value basically of the secret. Don't worry, you can also always check this again if you don't believe it by rewinding YouTube a bit. So if we then go to challenge number 7, which is a Vault integration challenge, you'll find out that there are certain ways. We'll also mention a few of them to still get that secret. And then if you feel that, then you'll see, okay, so it's configured over there. So the nice thing is, So the nice thing is that it's all auto-configured based on the some dependencies, basically, which allows you to easily integrate Vault to your Spring Boot application. You see some configuration, which is also nicely explained in the Spring Boot documentation. But for now, let's skip the rest of it a bit and move ahead. And what we basically saw was an application that was authenticated. The nice thing is that given it's no longer hard-coded, we can now take care of authentication authorization. Because if you as a user would sign in, then you could see, okay, we are, you as a user are allowed to access certain secrets or do things. Of course, in the wrong secret set, we don't have your LDAP or whatever set up, so we use a token directly. But normally, you now with Vault can make sure that it's based on an IDP, an identity provider, so you can make sure that you first have to authenticate and that we can check, hey, are you authorized or not? And of course, if people are using tokens to directly access Vault, please revoke those, because those are one of the major problems that that Vault still has. If you have tokens lingering around with two broad access policies attached to them. Do we have auditability? Yes, because what we often see in solutions is that we basically could, for instance, take all the audit data from Vault and put that into an elk stack, so we can see in logging like, hey, X, Y, or Z application X, Y, or Z, or user 1, 2, or 3 try to access this and that. And the nice thing is that the policies you just saw are actually hard-coded as code. So you can use HCL, the configuration language, to define what you want to allow as terms of policy. So whenever you have to reprovision part of Vault, you can make sure that these are at the same basis, again, due to its hard-coded nature. And the nice thing is that you can also do some audits immediately by interacting with Vault to see what's happening over there. So all of a sudden we have auditability. We can see who should be able to access the secrets by means of the policies. And we can see who has access to secrets by means of the logging in our, for instance, elk stack or whatever you want to forward these events for. Then the next question, of course, do we have temporality? Was it easy to rotate, for instance? Yeah, because you can, for instance, have credentials in Vault which only live for a very short while. And secrets in the KV backend can easily be rotated. And as to the AR versions, it's also easy to go back to another version. And given the semantic nature of versioning, it becomes easier to understand where you're at. And if it comes to blast radius and history, which is also very important, we can make sure that we can easily add more secrets, which allows you to basically reduce the blast radius, because if you have multiple secrets for different type of actions that you want to do, for instance, you don't reuse the password for your Twitter and Facebook, but now we can easily add more secrets because it's easy to manage them. You can also scope down the secret, for instance, have a secret for different APIs, or even go a step further. If there are certain higher privilege actions, you could say, okay, let's have a secret for that given privilege action. And history can also be taken care of by making sure we revoke, for instance, temporal secrets and make sure that they're no longer usable or obtainable in that sense. So there's a lot of stuff you can do with Vault. It allows you to have temporal access to cloud providers like AWS. It allows you to have temporal credentials for other services and databases, and lots of other things you can do with that. And that's great that you have all of these options. But having all these options and this configuration language on top of it can also become challenging, because if you use Vault for many solutions, it also gives a configuration challenge because you have to configure all of those HCL policies. And then there's additional Kubernetes code or Terraform code, whatever you require to integrate this correctly, that also needs to be maintained. And we found out while working with various customers that not all DevOps consumers know how to work with that. It takes time to get used to. It doesn't mean that using Kubernetes in general or using Vault in general is a bad idea, but please be aware that whatever solution you're using to manage your secrets, that you get trained sufficiently at ensuring that you know how to use it and how to definitely not use it. And well, the Vault challenge itself, running Vault itself can also be challenging because For instance, if we look at our truffle hawk again and we scroll down, which we didn't do the previous time, you'll see something interesting here. For instance, vault can be sealed and unsealed by means of unsealing keys. And here you basically see unsealing keys that by mistake got added to the Git history of wrong secrets. What makes it worse is that we also, by incident, committed a root token, because once you have a root token, it's very easy to put it somewhere in your file system because you want to make sure you didn't do anything wrong. You want to check a few things with the root token, and then all of a sudden you forgot to remove that. Of course, all of these steps as practice are a bad idea in general, but the wrong secrets repository is not the only one that contains root tokens for Vault or for any of those services in general. So this can be pretty challenging. And then from here onward, there's basically two directions that we can take, and that's where you basically come in. So we started talking a bit about Vault and its basic integration and how to basically consume secrets. And we talked a little bit about, hey, give hints about what not to do, such as storing, for instance, your root token to Git, or having tokens laying around, or have overly broad policies. And of course, there's multiple solutions to make it easier to actually make it easier to use Vault in your day-to-day lives by, for instance, using the transit backend. And that's one direction we can talk about in the upcoming 10 minutes. The other thing that we could do that might also be interesting is having a demo of the AWS challenges. So we can also talk a little bit about what could possibly go wrong if you do secrets management in the cloud. So I wonder in YouTube, do we have any feedback on that subject? Any takes? We have one vote for AWS. Any other takers? All right, then we first move to AWS. Please note that the slides are available after this talk, so it's easy to take a look at the other parts if it comes to the Vault integration. So if you rather want to do Vault but didn't want to speak out, you can still take a look at that. So let's go doing some interactive stuff. And sorry for the delay because there's 2 minute difference in there. So let's go to AWS. So in AWS, there's in general 3 ways on how you could store secrets. Well, actually, there's 2 definitely being used. One is basically to provide an encrypted value in the SSM parameter store, which is used mostly for configuration and for interaction with various services, whether that's EC2 or some of your other stuff like the EKS pipelines, the EKS clusters and such. And the other one is the AWS Secrets Manager, which by nature already tells is definitely the place where you want to store your secrets. Both of them are really nice. Both of them have their merits because you can, for instance, have AWS AAM configured to make sure that you shouldn't be able to just access those secrets if you have a certain role. And another nice thing is that we can actually instruct these type of services by, for instance, infrastructure as code. Infrastructure as code. Doesn't that slightly look or sound familiar if you're just listening to what we just discussed with Kubernetes? Luckily, it actually is. So what we often see is that people, for instance, use Terraform or CloudFormation to start providing information to the cloud provider to configure the infrastructure in the cloud, which by nature is great because it allows you to audit whatever you're doing. It makes sure it's reproducible and it has lots of other merits. The other nice thing is, or lesser nice thing, is that people often tend to forget that for putting secrets in, it's better to look at certain Terraform providers, for instance, that actually encrypt the secrets for you. And in this little challenge, we'll see a version that doesn't have that. So we can try a little bit of a live demo here. And if I run out of time, just let me know, but I'll try to remain in. So you are currently looking at a recording, and here you see an actual implementation of the latest version. So at challenge number 9, you see, okay, we're generating an AWS secret through Terraform. What happens to the Terraform state? If you follow the wrong secrets instructions, you will basically see that at some point we say Terraform init, Terraform plan to do the planning, and Terraform apply. When you do Terraform apply and all those different steps, basically, what happens is that your Terraform state gets created. Now, of course, there's a little bit more to this to actually find out what's happening. But what you can often do is just go to the Terraform state. So here we do that with code, just simple and plain, terraform.tf state. Yes, and then we'll open up Visual Studio Code and have a look at that Terraform state of ours. And it's always nice to look for keys, words like password and stuff like that. Obviously, you could also download this and then use Trufflehook to go through it. And then Trufflehook again will find secrets inside. It's a beautiful tool. So let's look for password. So here we see passwords. Apparently we did something with that passwords. Here is a SSM parameter for password. And this is a value. I'm not sure if this is the one, because we can store plenty of secrets in our Terraform state, of course. And let's try to basically submit this and see if it works. Yeah, that's actually the one. So we generated this for the SSM parameter store and have that as a secret. Of course, you use data type text, which means other people could easier see it as well if their role allows it for this. And there's lesser protection involved. So of course, you could have used a secret. But then still, if we used, it's actually a secure string. So there was actually already some security on top of it, but it didn't withhold us for actually using this directly. Oh, well, that's not so nice. If you're a Terraform user and you have the argument as being member of a platform team or an argument as member of some cloud, whatever team, however you want to call yourself, that it's Jeroen, a good idea. Yes.
Screen is difficult to read. If you can zoom in on that black part of the screen, would be nice. Yep, thank you.
Here we go. So here's that secret we found basically as part of the secrets provider. If you're part of one of those teams and you want to make sure you can actually apply the Terraform locally, that also means you or your computer has direct access to the secrets in Terraform state, which is why it's a good idea in general to try to encrypt those. So that's one thing. The other thing that often comes to mind is, of course, those policies. So in challenge 10, and I leave this to you basically, actually that's challenge 11, I guess. Let's have a look. Yeah, so at challenge 11, basically, we provided a certain role, can't read secrets, that you can use to do some IAM privilege escalation. Because obviously you can define your roles as such that no human can have access to a role that directly accesses the secrets manager or the SSM parameter store. But then often we end up mistakenly, for instance, allowing a certain role to create new roles, or we allow a certain role to jump to other roles. And by that, it becomes rather easy to make mistakes in there. And therefore, secrets management is not just making sure your secret is safe, it often also means make sure your authorization configurations is such that it doesn't bite you in your bottom. So that's a few things that can really help. Similarly, if we look at challenge 10 and we want to go to the conclusion immediately, for instance, we have a randomized secret that we provided through the secrets manager. But if you still mount it to the Kubernetes pod directly, instead of letting the application pick it up for you, the moment somebody can try to attack the application or other applications to go over the different mounts for different pods, you end up still revealing the secret that was so carefully protected by your cloud provider. And which, by the way, goes makes me mention one principle I almost forgot, is that it's really important to make sure that the secret gets as close to your, as exposed to your consumer as possible. So if you're running in the cloud, for instance, at AWS or Google or whatsoever, and you're using Kubernetes and you have an application running in a container in a pod, which needs that secret, make sure that that application is the only one who's able to access that, not just the worker node where the application runs on in Kubernetes, not the full Kubernetes cluster that you provide through their cloud infrastructure, but try to make it as tiny as possible. That's basically a lot of things to take home in that sense. And I would like to invite you to take those different things yourself, pick up those different things yourself. Basically, we have a lot of lessons learned still left to go back into. Let's see if we can get there. Yeah. So first of all, make sure you can and will rotate your secrets. Build to replace, basically. Another thing is make sure you label your secrets so your migration will not hurt, because we just talked about plenty of solutions. And you'll find out that you'll make mistakes in the solution you currently have, and that the current solution for you doesn't fit you, whether that's Kubernetes, whether it's Vault or a cloud provider. There's no real right or wrong as long as you can control it in a very good way. So therefore, having metadata stored on your secret so you know where the secret is and why the secret is the way it is, allows you to have an easier migration. Also, make sure that the creation, consumption, and monitoring of your secrets is easy. And monitoring your secret doesn't mean you have to stare at your secret, but need to make sure that you can see all the actions that happen at your secret by either authorized or unauthorized entities. And storing secrets encrypted is one challenge. Using the right access controls to not logging the actual secret is also very important. Making sure you don't have local copies. There are so many things you need to think about, and many of these things are actually throughout this presentation passing by either passively or actively. But have a look at, for instance, the wrong secrets app and see what you can learn from that. Another thing is make sure you really have a small blast radius. If your secrets gets compromised, make sure that it doesn't have a high impact. That's generally hard for Vault root tokens and for root credentials for your cloud provider. But for many other things, you can actually scope it down, and please do so. Yes, you'll end up with a lot more secrets, but at least you can make sure that you can have a better granular access control on top of them. And make sure that the secret control is close to the developers, by the way, because your security team, your site reliability engineering team, and this is actually part of the whole secrets pipeline story that we kind of skipped in, but most important lesson from that one is basically make sure everybody can manage the secrets at their own, because the moment the secret is compromised, you want to move fast, you want to rotate, you want to update. And security and SREs are often busy with lots of different things that need to be taken care of, whereas DevOps people could help directly. If you want to do secrets lifecycle management through a pipeline, for instance, which is about the slides you can still download later on, make sure you actually secure it properly. Most important, make sure secrets are short-lived wherever is possible, and make sure you actually have security and break loss procedures in place. So whenever something goes wrong, you can still access the secret in a manual way. Given the last demo, it's a bit mixed up, but I hope you still enjoyed it. Do you have any questions left?
Okay, Jeroen, thank you for this presentation. Based on the chat in YouTube, we have one question from Daniel Ostermeyer. He is interested in how we protect the root keys, etc., that we now have created to access the vault. It feels like we are just delegating the fundamental challenge here. So, what is your opinion?
That's actually a correct observation. You definitely are delegating it, because the problem with all of the secrets management is that you need some sort of root secret to protect the other secrets. There's, of course, various storage solutions which you could use to have that secret stored somewhere else. And what you can also do is make sure that you provide that you, for instance, revoke that root token once you have different type of administrative tokens that have less action, less blast radius than your root token, and then store those securely in another system. That's often possible with a lot of secret management solutions, that you can say, okay, we take the root access of something that has overly broad access to everything, and we try to chop that up and then revoke the original overly powerful credential. In many systems, that's also not possible, which means you have to start securing that in another secret storage solution, where then you have to provide your additional security tokens like MFA or whatever on top of that to make sure you have strong authentication in place, and the whole shebang is repeated for that secret storage solution again. What you eventually will end up with, and that's the problem you always see, is that you'll have that it's very hard to have a homogeneous secrets management solution. You'll always need some heterogeneity, as in for the root tokens that you still have left, whether chopped up or not, that they're going to be stored in the secondary system, which is not as accessible as the primary system where all the other secrets are stored in. Any other questions?
I currently don't see any other questions in the chat. So, Jeroen, thank you again. Please keep in mind that the chat is still open, and in this same channel we'll have the next presentation in about 15 minutes. So if you do have additional questions for Jeroen, well, either use the contact details you can see on the screen right now, or ask them in the chat during the presentation of Irfan. And Irfan will be joining us in about 15 minutes with doing security in DevOps, but do it the right way. So I would say Jeroen, thank you. Please enjoy the presentation by Irfan as well. And for everybody, please grab a cup of coffee, cup of tea, or a beer perhaps. And we'll see you all back in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. In about 5 minutes, Irfan will provide the second presentation for today, which is doing security in DevOps the right way. But first, some announcements from our side, from OWASP the Netherlands. This meetup is not the only thing that will be done this year. A next large opportunity gathering is the OWASP Benelux chapter. Oops, and I do need to. The OWASP Benelux Meet Days. These are in Belgium, in the beautiful city of Brugge, and they are on the last Thursday and Friday of November. And now I have my own voice somehow back. Okay, yeah. So the last Thursday and Friday of November in Brugge is the OWASP Benelux Day. Registration can be found on owaspbenelux.nl, and everybody is welcome to join, of course. So again, in about 3 minutes, Irfan will start his presentation on the DevOps security. Please stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the OWASP Netherlands Chapter Meetup. The next presentation is from Irfan, and Irfan will be talking about doing security in DevOps in the right way. Irfan, welcome. Thank you for presenting, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, and guys, welcome for tuning in. I just want to double check whether I'm auditable. Can any one of you just leave a comment in the YouTube channel that you're able to hear me and see a blank white screen? Perfect, thanks, Jeroen. All right, so let's just start the presentation by looking at this picture over here. So what are we looking at, guys? We're seeing a man harvesting a very green, watery, beautiful coconut, but then in a very disturbing way. And I know you guys are thinking about it, like he's really overdoing it, right? There might be a few of you that are thinking that this is also me. No, it's not me in the picture. The guy does look like me, but I can assure you it's not me. But I can tell you I've been in many situations in organizations that I worked for where I felt like this, right? I felt like I had to do a process, whether it's IT or HR compliance, doesn't matter. I had to do a process that didn't actually make a lot of sense. And it's an absolute waste of time and very unfulfilling. So there's not an option in YouTube for you guys to let me know whether you have encountered situations where you felt like this. But by leaving a comment now, maybe it will help as well. Whether you encountered any situation in your organizations where you felt like this, like you had to do a process that didn't make sense. So if you can just leave a comment, that would be appreciated. I think there's a slight delay between my talking and what's being streamed on YouTube. I will guess that many of you will recognize this, right? And I want you to keep that feeling, this feeling that you might come up in you, that you had to do things, you still have to do things that you don't believe in, but you have to do it. I want you to keep this feeling, because this is exactly what today's talk is going to be about. We don't want to do things from a security perspective where our DevOps engineers will feel this way, will feel stupid. They have to do security, but it doesn't make sense. So we want to prevent it. And today's talk is about that. So a little bit about me. My name is Irfan Santu. I currently work for Wolters Kluwer. It's a company listed in the Netherlands, but I've not been long with that company. It just has been for 2 months now. Before Wolters Kluwer, I worked for the ABN AMRO Bank for 7 years, had multiple roles. But the last role that I had was the head of the security engineering department. It's a department of around 40 security engineers that would help the different DevOps teams to build in security as they build their application or build, the infrastructure for the bank. And ABN AMRO is basically, going through a massive transformation where they're transforming more than 500 teams, dev team, toward DevOps way of working. Plus, they're moving towards the public cloud. A lot of their workloads, they're migrating it or modernizing it to be operated from the cloud. And I had the opportunity to lead that transformation from a security perspective, where we would integrate security into that DevOps transformation. A little bit about me as well. I have a technical background. I did computer science at the University of Utrecht. And I'm fascinated by the inner sciences of yoga and meditation. And just to keep you a little bit awake as well, because I know it's almost the last hour of your working day. So glad that you could join. But I'll do a yogic exercise together with you as well to keep you a little bit awake. So let's just go into it. So what is DevOps? I think for us to understand, how to do security right in DevOps, it's more important to first also understand what DevOps is. And, before DevOps, we would have, Dev and Ops, and developers that want to go to production. They want to make sure that, their application, the functionality, their code goes to production fast. They want to get that market feedback and keep building cool stuff, right? While we'll have the ops people or ops engineer that wants to make sure that once the application is in production, that it's running stable, right? So they want more stability. And naturally, we feel while the DevOps engineers want to go fast, or ops engineer, wants stability. So just imagine you were driving a car, and our dev engineers would be the gas pedal, and our ops engineer would be your brake pedal. And what would happen if you would, step on both pedals at the same time? I think your car will make a screenshot. So this is what is happening in the world of dev versus ops. And I've not even included the security department, right? As an illustration in this picture, right? Maybe the security department would be, your handbrake. So if these different instruments for driving a car do not work together, you can imagine that, it will be very difficult to move from A to B. You would be happy if you move from A to B, but even more happy if you're able to move from A to B in a safe manner. So it's very important to make sure that all these different instruments, these different teams work together. Okay, we can go to the next things, how to go about this. So I'm just watching different screens, guys, so that's why I might be a little bit disturbed, but it's very simple. We just need to make sure that from a security perspective, our security processes, they get streamlined with the DevOps processes, right? So they work together. They shouldn't work against each other. It sounds very logical and easy, but it's difficult to achieve. And I'll tell you why. I'll share my story why that's the case. And the reason why I'm saying that, right? So for the DevOps teams, it makes all the difference, right? Just before releasing their code to production, if you're going to do the security testing, then give them feedback. It's completely different the way they perceive security than when they can do the security testing while they're designing their application, while they're coding, right? So that sort of shifting left is very important to do security the right way in DevOps. But how do we shift that security left, right? So for me, the way I look at it, it's the same way as you would plant a seed, right? The ground alone is not enough. You need the water, you need the sunlight, you need the warmth to make it happen that the seed goes from a sprout to a plant, to a flowering plant, even a fruit-bearing plant. You need all these different ingredients. And my statement is that in order to do security right in DevOps, you need to approach it from 3 categories. 1, you need to automate as much as possible. It's the only way to make security happen at scale. I think automation is definitely the heart and the engine of DevOps. Secondly, you need to embrace new technologies and methodologies as an opportunity to improve security. And thirdly, you need to be inclusive, right? So security is not a thing for the security department, it's everybody's responsibilities. So these are the 3 pillars, the 3 dimensions, which I will be discussing with you in today's conversation. So today's agenda, again, we're going to definitely touch upon what DevOps is, what are success factors of DevOps, what is DevOps trying to achieve. Only if we understand that properly, we can understand, how to embed security in such a way that it doesn't break DevOps, but it makes it happen, it enables it. We're going to talk about the 3 pillars again, what I find important if you want to set up security in DevOps the right way, what to focus upon. And we're going to have times for questions that you might have asked as well. The slides, version of the slides will be shared with OWASP. So in case that you're wondering, yes, I will share a version of these slides. The presentation will take around 45 minutes maximum. So by 9 o'clock, we should be done. And if there are any questions, I'll try to go to the screen on YouTube to really see whether there are questions being asked, and then we'll make sure that I can answer them. All right, let's just start with DevOps. Before we go into DevOps, again, it's very important to understand how the world of DevOps looked before that, and that world existed of Dev versus Ops, right? So we would have David as a developer, wants to bring a lot of change to production, wants to go fast. Peter is our operator. He's the guy that wants stability, will request rigid testing, ITIL processes being in place. Again, there's a tension between these two and a wall of confusion, right? It seems like they both work against each other because one wants to go fast, the other wants to have stability. So we could see in the IT world that this model didn't really fly. We saw that ABN AMRO as well. We found that a lot of iterations were actually needed for code going to production. And that is because the way it was being set up. Developers were really challenged in having speed and developing fast, while our operators, they don't want to call up late at night because their application has been broken down, right? Because no perfect good testing has been done. So they will make sure that before something goes to production, it works, it's stable. So this causes a wall of confusion. So what did the IT world do? They came up with a term DevOps, where they actually said, okay, I'm just going to create one team out of these both teams. One team, they are going to have developers and ops engineers together. We're going to call them DevOps engineers. And they're going to work together as one team in all the phases, important phases of developing software, whether it's planning your application development or coding, or even deploying or monitoring and operating. It's all one team, and you're going to do it in very short cycles. This way, already when you're coding, when you're planning your application changes, there is somebody from an operation perspective that already will give you feedback whether this is going to fly or not, or whether this is going to break, or whether this is not going to be able to execute it in the run environment. So that way the feedback loop is quite smaller, and you know, it works more smoothly. This is the idea of DevOps. So I've not even included the security team in this picture, because if you look at the DevOps lifecycle, there is no specific phase called security. So what happens then? You can add the security department being outside of the DevOps lifecycle of that DevOps team. And most of the organizations, you will see that this is the case. And what happens then is, because security also wants to make sure that, you know, if something is being coded, if something is being tested or pushed to production, that the security is okay. While the DevOps engineer wants to make, you know, wants to go fast and then, you know, ensure that there's enough speed in going through life and pushing code to production. There's again another sort of wall of confusion, right? Because they have to work with the security department and they're lagging behind. Their processes are not geared towards the processes of the DevOps team. Maybe you've noticed as well, this looks like a very happy security guy. I don't think that's the reality. In reality, we'll have a guy that's look like this, but it's not like I'm looking like this, but we have the perception of security people as being tough people, always saying no. So maybe this is a bit more representative of how the DevOps engineers see us as security professionals. But again, this is a wall of confusion, and it's not going to fly if we want to really make security happen within DevOps. So what is the way to do it? The way to do it could be to say, okay, we're going to make sure a security engineer, a security professional is available at every step of this DevOps lifecycle, right? When you're planning your application change, when you're coding, somebody is there that will give you the advice, that will look together with you what should be done from a security perspective. Now, this model makes sense from a theory perspective, but if you look at the stats that in organizations, you know, the ratio between dev engineers, ops engineers, and security people is 100 to 10 to 1. Plus, we know that the security market is really booming. It's quite challenging to find good security people or security people in general. There's a huge shortage of security people. This model is never going to fly. It's not scalable, right? So we can never have that many security people within an organization that will be there all the time, advising the different, you know, DevOps engineer in their phases of developing the application. So this is a theoretical model, but it's not going to fly. So what would be a good solution, right? So a good solution would be to give our DevOps engineers security badges, right? So say you are responsible for security, and every step you take in, you know, your DevOps lifecycle, you will be securing that application. So this is what I want to say, that for me, a lot of people are calling using the terms DevSecOps. To be very honest, I'm not a big fan of that, because if the security department would be outside of the DevOps teams, I can imagine, and if they would take care of security, I can imagine that we would call it DevSecOps or DevOpsSec, doesn't matter, something separate. But my expectation to do security right at DevOps, and I've seen that, is really to make sure that you give the security responsibility to these DevOps engineers themselves. And then you don't have to call it DevSecOps. It's just DevOps, which includes security, right? It's the same as QA or testing. It doesn't matter. You wouldn't put an extra term into that Dev QA Ops, right? Dev whatever Ops. I don't believe that that's the way we should look at it. We should just call it DevOps and make sure that security, QA, and all these other different capabilities are part of that. So from now on, I'll use that term DevOps. And for me, it automatically entails that security is being considered into that process. So far, so good. So now it's time to do a little bit of yoga. So for those of you that are at home, you're sitting, what I want you to do is make sure you're seated and you put your hands on your thighs. Just rest your hands on your thighs with your palms facing upwards. And don't close your eyes yet. I'll just give you the instruction. In the sequence, I'll ask you to turn your arms facing downwards, right? And then again, arms facing upwards, palms facing upwards. So for now, what I will do is I'll ask you to rest your arms on your legs, close your eyes, listen to my voice, and breathe. Now turn your arms, palms facing downwards, still resting on your thighs. Keep breathing. Watch your breath. Turn your arms, palms facing upwards. Keep breathing. Turn your arms, palms facing downwards. Keep breathing. Watch your breath. Turn your arms, palms facing upwards. Keep breathing. All right. Slowly, very slowly, take your time. Open your eyes. So there is not really a good interaction mechanism for me. Thank you, Kun. There's not really a good interaction mechanism for me, but normally I would just ask you, who can tell me the difference between breathing when your palms are facing upward versus your palms are facing downward? Just try to remember it again, how it felt. You will see that when your palms are facing upward, the breathing is easier. It's more natural than when your palms are facing downward. And the point that I'm trying to make is that even within yoga, the simplest change of your arms facing upwards versus downward already makes an impact on our breathing, something that fundamental as our breathing. And the parallel that I want to make is, if we don't organize security in a specific way in DevOps, we can either break DevOps and the value that DevOps should be bringing to the IT organization, or we can enable it. We can make the breathing even easier, better. So that's why I have categorized 3 different pillars where we need to organize security and to make it happen to really unlock the value of DevOps from a security standpoint. So the first one for me is automation. Automating is about making sure there is no or minimal user interaction needed to make security happen, right? Think about some specific sort of testing. Secret management was also automation that Jeroen explained. So we're going to go about this one, but automation is about that. Then we have a second pillar for me. It's what I call MITology. It stands for methodology and technology. So we really use the methodologies that IT is adopting to, but also technologies that's available and that will be coming in our direction to really improve and enhance security, grasp it as an opportunity to do security better. And the last one is inclusiveness. Inclusiveness is really about the passion and the mindset of your organization of doing security right within DevOps and how to go about it. So just to make it simpler for you, right? If you want to make the analogy of driving a car from A to B, you want to get from A to B in a safe and fast manner. Automation is really your engine of the car. MITology is about the aerodynamics of the car, maybe the quality of the roads, the weather conditions. It's really something out there. Inclusiveness is really about the mindset of the driver, right? So yes, I am responsible for driving from A to B in a fast and safe manner. And I'm going to use everything that's available to me, the weather condition, shortcuts on the road, whatnot, to go safe and fast. Okay, I'm seeing some comments. People, process, technologies. Yes, thank you. So we're going to go into each of these pillars. We'll start with automation. So again, it's not only about giving our DevOps engineer a security badge, right? We as security folk, we need to enable them all the way, because that's the only way to make security happen at a scale, which is needed. Right, so it's very important when I talk about automation, and this is what I really want to stretch out. This is my experience for the last five years that I've seen when talking about AppSec and automation and DevOps. Is when I talk about automation, it's not only the implementation of a tool, guys. It's really about building a capability where automation is at the heart of that capability, right? So think about if you would have to, your parents would say to you as a kid, here is your toothbrush at a washing table, and they would just say to you once, please brush your teeth, and that's it. would we today have these healthy teats that we have? Maybe for some of us, it didn't actually even matter, but of course, they had to constantly say that to us, right? They had to remind us, they had to train us, they had to even enforce it to us. If you're not going to brush your teeth, you're not going to get a bedtime story or something like that, right? They forced us to basically, and they spent a lot of time for us to really ingrain that we have to brush our teeth. And nowadays, we're brushing our teeth without somebody asking us to do that because we see the benefit of it. So this is the same way with automation, guys. It's not about rolling out a tool. It's really about making sure that it's being adopted by the organization, right? So I have as a security department, help the DevOps engineer, help the IT teams to maybe take a hit on the false positive that tool is generating. Write clear instruction, right, of how to use that tool or the feedback that tool is giving, how to go about that. Provide proper trainings to your DevOps team, right? It's everything that's packaged with that automation, with that implementation of that tool. It's very important. I cannot say it enough, but this is very important if you want to make DevOps security implementation and DevOps successful. So let's just quickly go through this. I'm not gonna talk very elaborated on the different capabilities, but the first one is threat modeling. Not sure whether this has been discussed earlier in talks within OWASP. Pretty sure it must have been, but it's a systematic way of identifying vulnerabilities and threats within your application, your data flows, and taking a proper threat response on that one. Within ABN AMRO, 2.5 years ago, we started with threat modeling. And I can remember very vividly, it was new to our security department as well to do that, to give the training to the DevOps teams to threat model. But also that once, it was decided that more than 500 DevOps teams would go, dev teams would go to DevOps, we had to train all these different DevOps teams in that process. That's how we institutionalized that capability. We were doing it very manually. And after transforming 60 teams or so, I decided to automate that. So we went into proof of concept with different vendors to see, okay, what is it that we can automate in this process? So we made sure that we bought a tooling, we set up a capability around it, the training and whatnot, where once DevOps teams draw their application diagrams, their data flows, and select what specific components of how the application is interacting with it and working, basically you would automatically get some threats out of it. And those threats were fed by threat libraries, are still fed by threat libraries that are being managed by the security department. So it's possible to even automate your threat modeling. You'll get feedback about specific threats that you need to address. Those threats can go to your Azure boards or your Jira boards as user stories, security user stories that you will have to take upon as you go building up your application. The next one is secret management and credential management. I'm not going to discuss this. Jeroen has already touched upon this elaborately in the last hour, so let's leave it for there. SAS testing, I'm pretty sure you guys are aware of that one, right? So while you're actually coding, you can get feedback from specific tooling. On a design level, basically your code might have flaws, so those would be identified and given as feedback to you, maybe already in your pipeline, in your IDE. We also see a lot of developers and most of the organizations, they will use software from third parties, right? Libraries from other security engineers, software engineers. But what will happen is mostly that code doesn't get maintained as frequent as it should be. So it contains vulnerability. You want to make sure that beside your own code, code that you import from outside, that it's being scanned as well for vulnerabilities. And then, based on those scanned results, you take the right action as well. Can be automated as well. Security assurance has to do with, the SAS testing, security testing that you can automate. The DAS testing and security testing that you can automate. So think about, different sort of pen testing that you're doing, specific use cases that you're working out in your pen test. If it's possible, why not create a standard test as a unit test, but then call it a security test, put it in the pipeline. Every time you push your code to production, that sort of security test can be run as well automatically. Hey, you have automation there as well. Container security, for me, that's could be a little bit more advanced because not a lot of organizations are yet using containers. But for those that are using it, of course, you need to make sure that your containers are secure as well, both while deploying, but also when you're running it. So for that, there's tooling available, there's automation available to make that happen. Secure infrastructure, again, we're deploying now a lot towards the cloud. If you look at, the security context of your organization, your policies, your standard, maybe your policy is saying because of this sort of data you're deploying, you need to encrypt your data at rest, or you need to make sure you have specific, firewallings enabled, or that, I don't know, whatever policies you can consider from a security perspective, your S3 buckets are not open or whatnot. All those can be given as a feedback in your pipeline to the developers, right? It can be automated. And then we have security operations and threat response. This has to do with, specific logging and monitoring that you want to put in place, maybe failed logging attempts. There's a vulnerability that has been identified based on threat intelligence that's been brought in from externally, and your environment might be vulnerable. So how do you cope with that sort of cascadence, right? So once those are being reported, how do you go about as the DevOps teams? Of course, the security department themselves have a role to play in this one, but as DevOps engineer, one can do automation on this as well to take specific steps. So this is a very exhaustive list, and one can ask, do we have to do all these things to make security happen in DevOps, at least from an automation standpoint? I do think it's needed. Sooner or later, you will need it. So it's good to pay attention on this one. But if you're not there yet, if you don't have all these different capabilities implemented, my suggestion would be to start with a few, right? Do a threat analysis, see where in your organization you're challenged the most, right? Maybe it's something to do with secret management. Maybe, a lot of security vulnerabilities could be detected if a SaaS testing would be done, right? These are then the capabilities you should be start building within your organizations together with the DevOps teams. And we're going to touch upon that in the third pillar, by the way. All right, so far so good. So again, the reason why we need to do all these different capabilities, also applying the defense in depth strategy from cybersecurity, right? So just assume that probably when you're threat modeling, you're going to miss a threat. Maybe that sort of threat can be identified, can be spotted, vulnerability can be spotted when you're going to do a pen testing or so. So defense in depth is very important over here. Parents inclusiveness. Yes. Okay. I'm just watching the comments there. Great. So I already touched upon this one. Let's go into the second pillar. The second pillar for me has to do what I call again with MITology. It's about the mindset. Sorry, it's about using specific methodologies and technologies to your advantage to do security even better in DevOps. If I say to you guys, right, that IT is very static, IT is very boring, it never changes. Pretty sure you guys want to kick my ass, so sorry for my language. But I mean, if there's one thing that's really exciting in the future and has been so far, it's IT, right? IT has really disrupted the way the world operates now. And I don't think we are done at all, right? I think this is just the beginning. So there's a lot of waves of new technologies, new methodologies coming in our direction, and that's exciting. But I know as a security leader, but I've seen that as well, a lot of security departments feel challenged with this, right? So if the CIO decides they want to go to the cloud, they want to, adopt microservices and containers within their organization, or whatever new technology they want to adopt as one of the waves that's coming in the direction, the CISO departments feel really challenged, right? They were just about to get their security posture at a specific level without too much change in the IT environment, and then now the CIO, the CTO is introducing something new, which brings a lot of new headaches to them as well. So if we look at what's going to come in our direction, right? And this is just an example. 2021 is just an example. We could have gone 2022. Sorry, we could have gone the previous years as well, right? So all these new technologies, they follow a specific cycle, and Gartner calls it the hype cycle. So you start with, innovation trigger, something that might be great, might add a lot of value from an IT perspective in the organization. And then, it skyrockets, it can skyrocket in terms of what the expectation is that technology can solve for an organization. But then people hit reality and say, this is not the silver bullet. It's not going to solve it, what I want. So there becomes a sort of, how do we call it? And disillusionment about what that technology solves for you. But then slowly, it becomes more accepted, business as usual. And then we know the actual value that new technology brings in. So it looks like a wave. And a lot of organizations, as we go, will have more and more of these waves coming to their direction. And the CISO will get confronted with these different changes coming into direction. So as a CISO, I know, Koen, you're one of the CISOs, but as a CISO, you will get challenged, right? These waves will come in your direction. And you can do two things as a CISO department, as a CISO. One, when these waves come, you can drown. And secondly, you have the option to ride that wave. And maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think in this session, we'll have a lot of people that will, probably all the people that will say, okay, I want to ride that wave, right? So let's look at that, guys. So for me, I see three different areas from a MI theology perspective that we can really leverage to enhance the security posture within DevOps. One is CI/CD. So it's continuous integration and delivery. So before CI/CD, before you would go live, you would have to stop to say, okay, and now the security department will do a security test over here. But with CI/CD, because it's continuous, stopping is not an option, right? So that means security testing needs to happen also on a continuous basis. And I think that's a great opportunity. Just imagine security testing being embedded into the CI/CD process in such a way that it happens automatically. It happens continuously. So it's a great opportunity. Don't miss this opportunity to make sure that you use CI/CD and the concept of CI/CD as an enabler to make security happen. The second one for me is public cloud. And I'm not sure which sort of organizations you guys are working for, but I've seen that ABN AMRO made that decision 2 years ago to go to public cloud. It was not that an easy decision, but I strongly believe that the public cloud is much safer than most of the internal environments that are out there that organizations have, right? So I'm not gonna spill the beans on that one, but logically looking at how much money, billions of dollars, the public cloud provider like AWS, Azure, Google are spending on security and securing their cloud, it's amazing. And there will be none of these organizations, larger corporate organizations, that will even come close to the security budget that these guys are spending on the cloud. They're hiring the smartest people. So I strongly believe that the cloud itself is more secure than the internal environments of organizations. That's one thing. Secondly, a lot of capabilities that organizations have been struggling to build, right? So I'm not talking about secret management, could be an example, but think about encryption, think about identity access management system, think about MFA, all these different capabilities. A lot of organizations are actually still struggling to build it in for them. But with the cloud, those capabilities come out of the box. You can actually click, put a finger, and then you're already there. You have that. So it's really amazing. And I think we should be leveraging that as an enabler to make security even happen even more and better within DevOps. And the third one for me is what I call microservices. So instead of building larger application, monolithic applications, you look at, can we not decompose that and build smaller independent services, right? That will work together to make it happen. And by doing that, of course, you're reducing part of the complexity of that larger application to be managed into smaller independent services. But also, because the large application would most potentially contain larger sort of risk, you are decomposing that risk into smaller parts as well, more foreseeable parts as well. Your attack surface becomes smaller. And you can really tailor your security measures to where it's actually needed. That surface that might be attacked the most or is exposed to the internet or the client-facing part, that is the one that you can protect. All the other code is just behind another API gateway or whatnot, right? You don't have to pay that much attention. I'm not saying that you should not secure it, but you don't have to pay that much attention. While if it would be one big application, that application is client-facing, internet-facing, then probably you would have to pay attention to every detail of it, right? So you become more efficient. So I think microservices is really an opportunity for security to grab some, containerizing it as well. So another aspect is when a container behaves strange, you can easily kill it as well, right? And spin off something else from the past that might not have been infected or something like that. So it really gives us a lot of flexibility. And I just want to, that's what I want to focus is that use these different changes that are coming in your direction as a CISO department, as an IT department, as an opportunity to do security even better. I don't want to make a note though. These technologies, methodologies, right, whether it's Agile, DevOps, Cloud, CI/CD, they do bring their own set of risks with them, right? So what happens when your CI/CD toolings are compromised? What happens when your public cloud is compromised, right? It brings specific risks with them as well. So do also consider to make sure you roll out programs to make sure that these different methodologies, technologies are also secured enough. All right. Then we go to the last part, guys, which I call inclusiveness. So inclusiveness for me, it's again about the mindset and the passion to do security within the organization. One can call it culture. To be honest, that word is being misused so much nowadays and used so much that I don't want to use that. To be very honest, I want to stay far away from it. But you can relate it to culture as well, right? So one of the things that I find that it's important to do as part of inclusiveness is to co-create security. And co-creating security for me is just do it together with the development team, right? With the DevOps engineer, right? So you will see a lot of security tooling nowadays available that are really geared towards security professionals. And if we really want to shift the security left, if you want the DevOps teams to, by giving them the badge, take ownership of security, we need to make sure that these tools are really friendly for them, right? That they can use it. So that means, again, clear, not a lot of false positives should be coming out of it. Work together with them, how you can tune the rule engine in such a way that they don't feel disappointed once they get feedback from that tool, right? Clear instruction and documentation as you're writing it for non-security people, right? This is also very important. Sometimes we as security people, we communicate in security lingo, but DevOps engineers will not always understand that. So make it DevOps friendly. When you expect actions, make it clear, actionable for them as well, right? What is it that you're expecting from them? So really co-create that security with them. And within ABN AMRO, we created a community of security champions, where this is exactly what we're trying to do over there, where we would just write the right guidance. We would work on what is the right sort of security requirements we can put forward that is implementable for them. So all these different things I think one can do. But even when you're going to build your capabilities where automation is at the heart of it, do it together with your DevOps community. Don't do it alone as a security department, in my opinion. And my advice would be. Second is talk about ownership, right? So they've built it, they run it, and they need to secure it, right? So this one is morely applicable for the DevOps engineers. So you're gonna, you are the one that's responsible for security within your application. Don't expect the security department to do that, right? So again, you've built it, you run it, you secure it. It's a mindset thing, and I think that needs to be enabled, right? The engineering leads, the product managers, they need to challenge the DevOps engineers that they are indeed giving security the right priority, and have that conversation with them. And we do see that within the community, the DevOps community, more and more DevOps engineers are saying that security is their responsibility. So that's a good thing. but it's about nurturing that as well. Last but not least is what I call letting go. And this is very difficult for security professionals. I've seen that with ABN AMRO Bank as well, right? So if we are not going to let go of what we should be doing as security and expect the DevOps engineers to do themselves, they're never going to grow, right? So consider your kids. If you're always going to pay attention to them, not going to let them make those mistakes, they will not grow into their full potential. So I think it's very important as a security team to trust the DevOps engineer at a specific moment. So they have to grow in the maturity, but you need to trust there as well. But if you're going to pay attention all the time, whether they're doing it right or not or wrong, and you're going to tick you on the finger, right? So you're going to just talk to them and say, this is not good behavior. They will always feel somebody is, looking behind their shoulders, looking above their shoulders. And are they going to take upon that security challenge there? I think by letting go, you're taking security really to the next level as a security professional. It's very difficult, but I think this is what's needed. And all these three different things, not only from an inclusiveness perspective, but the other pillars as well, I think it will really take time, right, to make happen. I don't think that DevOps and true DevOps will happen in 1 day or 1 month or 1 year. It's really a journey. And, a genius will definitely come out, but you need to give it time and you need to nurture it to make sure that that it goes into its full potential. So these are the three different pillars I wanted to share with you guys. I want to do a quick recap. Remember that feeling again. So if there's one takeaway from today's talk is, please make sure you go back to your organization, the way you work, and think about, I'm requesting security sort of processes. I'm implementing security processes. Are my processes making, our DevOps engineers feel like this, right? So I don't think, as security, we want them to suffer because of our actions. So this is one takeaway that I want to give you. Please remember this feeling. Supply chain risk and DevOps. Okay, I'm going to come to that a little bit later. We looked at DevOps, what DevOps is, how to look at security within DevOps. The wall of confusion, again, if you're not going to integrate security processes to work together with the DevOps processes, you're going to break it and you're going to create another wall of confusion. And then you're probably going to create the same situation where dev came from ops, right? That wall of confusion. So we don't want that. We looked at the three pillars, guys, where I think that one should pay attention to make security happen in DevOps the right way. Automation, methodology, and technology, use that as opportunities to improve your and even enhance your security. And we'll look at inclusiveness, the mindset, and I would call it the culture part of DevOps. All right, so this would be my call to action to you as well, right? So now that we have looked at how we can probably reach nirvana into security, I think the first thing I would like to ask you is go back to your organizations, go back to your engagements, and really ask yourself that question, right? Are you enabling DevOps with your security requirements, your processes, or are you breaking it? And what sort of role do you want to play as a security department into that story, right? Do you want to be the Ministry of No, or do you want to lead by example and show them how it's done? And I think, what we shouldn't forget as security professionals is IT has a hard job, right? So they're taking these big risks of transforming their IT organization and the organization itself, going towards the cloud, working DevOps, adopting microservices, looking at other way of working like Agile. These are very difficult transformation. And I think it's very courageous of them to do this. And the question that I would like to ask you is, do you have what it takes as well to adopt along, right? Transforming your own capabilities as security and your own workforce as well. So we understand what DevOps is. We have the right people that can have those conversations with a DevOps engineer. We have the right people that can say to you, if you're going to set up the capability like this for the DevOps teams to be consumed, you're going to actually work against DevOps principle and not with it. So grab this as an opportunity, guys, to take security to the next level. That would be my challenge to you. With that, I leave it as it is now. I do have some slides on tips and tricks, but I don't think I'll have enough time on that one. This is my contact details. I now will pause and see what sort of questions are being asked in the YouTube channel, and then come back to you on that. That is a very good question. And I think it should not be treated. By the way, one of my roles within ABN AMRO, before I was the head of security engineer, I was the head of the vendor security department, the third-party risk department. So supply chain is something that's not new to me. But it's quite difficult to see the integration within DevOps. I don't think the attention should be very much paid towards supply chain risk within DevOps, but just supply chain risk within your organization in general. That means when you're going to work together with vendors, make sure you audit them, make sure you make the right contractual agreement, make sure you do, if needed, pen tests, their software, pen tests, and security tests their hardware as well. I think this is important in general. Next to that, once you have their IT systems and their application and the software running into your own environments that can be used and consumed by the DevOps teams ultimately, make sure you have the right threat intel as well, right? And a response plan available. If something goes wrong, if vulnerabilities are being detected, how do you respond to that? So I don't think supply chain risk is something that we should be looking towards being worried about what the impact is on DevOps way of working. I think supply chain risk itself, we should try to manage it in the right way. So I'm not sure whether this is answering your question, but this is my point of view. So don't treat it something within DevOps just as a program, as something separately. Auditing your vendors in the beginning, making the right agreements, security testing the software, the hardware, but having the right response available as well. Once you have threat intel coming in saying that vendor is compromised, how do you go about it? How do you know what sort of components from that vendor is being used within your IT organization? And can you react to that in a timely manner? And that's, again, incident response, which is broader than just supply chain risk. Anything that might cause an incident within your organization, you need to respond on it on an adequate way, right?
Okay. So the next question, perhaps in between, Julian asked if you could provide the tips and tricks slide. Meanwhile, we could answer the other two questions. They are from Koen Goedgebeuren. In the context of trust but verify, do you think a proper maturity baseline is needed to trust a DevOps team, or would you be able to let go with all teams?
That's a very good question. I think Koen recognizes the challenge. I think there needs to be a balance in the level of trust and the mandate that a DevOps teams get based on their maturity. So, and I think this is a very hard thing. We have tried to do this at ABN AMRO. I don't think we are there yet to really say we know what the maturity of a DevOps team is in terms of security. So once you have that sort of baseline, yes, you can say this means they can make these sort of decisions. We don't have to go do a separate security testing in what they're doing maybe once in a month. You can do it maybe once in a year or something like that, right? So based on the baseline, you can adopt your trust level. So I think, Koen, you and I are on the same level in that, but it's very difficult to establish that baseline though. So that is the challenge, to establish the baseline. So I'm not sure whether it's answering your question, Koen.
Okay, let's go on to the next question, also from Koen. What would be a minimum maturity standard for a team? For example, I would not trust a 2-year-old with a sharp pocket knife just yet.
Yeah, but Koen, I think this is the same question, right? So the way we approached it at ABN AMRO, I can tell you that. So DevOps teams were not allowed to work on the cloud without going through a DevOps journey. And that journey, we would definitely make sure that not only from a security perspective, but also from a CI/CD perspective, from a cloud perspective, different capabilities, test and release management capabilities, these different teams would be educated on. So, and they had to show that they would be able to satisfy some of the requirements of the controls that we have from a security perspective. Only then they would get the license to say, okay, now I'm DevOps ready, I can work on the cloud. So I think that baselining happens and should happen through what ABN AMRO has done through a program. So you only get transform once you can show that you can handle a few things. But the problem, the challenge is once the DevOps teams have shown that maturity, there's nothing stopping the organization and the DevOps teams to drop in maturity as well, right? So how do you detect that? And how do you know that the DevOps teams are now, while they have gone through that journey, they have become mature, the maturity level has dropped, like that sort of mechanism you need to organize within your organization. And I think security dashboarding and reporting is one of the most important controls that you can have in place for that, right? So how well is that organization, that DevOps team doing in terms of securing their application over time? If you're seeing that too much of the security risk is, being, enabled in production, that means maybe something is happening with the maturity of the DevOps team. So that would be a good indicator to go and have that conversation with them. Guys, what happened? Okay.
All right.
All right.
There was another notification from Thomas. He said he was thinking of the use of third-party code libraries and dependencies in projects, such as with NPM. I think Dipper already provided a proper answer to that.
Yeah, and there are different toolings on that. I know that within ABN AMRO, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure. Are we using SonarQube or so? Couldn't maybe you know this one? Which tool do we use within ABN AMRO to detect third-party libraries, vulnerabilities in third-party libraries? So everybody should be looking for this, right? So in my opinion, it's an important capability. So it doesn't matter what the tool is, but yes, I think most of the organizations that want to do DevOps and security in DevOps should be looking for this capability to build up. That would be my answer. And I'm going to share the tips and tricks, guys, with you. That's formed here in 3 buckets and 3 audience. So can we just call it a day then?
Yes, I think we can. Irfan, thank you very much for your presentation. And of course, your contact details were in the sheet, so if anybody has questions, I'm sure they will be able to contact you. Thanks again, and also Jeroen, if you're still there, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, guys.
Some closing announcements from our side. And suddenly I have the feeling that I was muting myself, which means I'll just do it over. Some closing notes here. The OWASP Benelux days are next month on 25 and 26th of November. They are in Brugge, and well, of course, if COVID measures permit it at that time. Conference attendance is free, but if you are attending, please consider becoming one of our members of either the Dutch, the Belgium, or the Luxembourg chapter. Please leave some feedback on whether or not you like this setup for the meetings, as well as any suggestions if you would have other speakers or would have some topics, would like to have some topics discussed. Thank you all for your presentation and have a nice evening.